I'm going to give a brief overview of a conference that we just attended, the Science of Science Communication 3. It was at the National Academy of Science in DC in November of last year. Susie and Vanessa and Natalie all joined me there at this colloquium. We've written 3 blogs on the Ian website. Vanessa's blog is this blog here that talked about there's a science behind effective science communication. Research is much needed. Science and the practice of science communication face multiple challenges, and thus the alignment of researchers, funders, and practitioners and users is all needed. Scientists are secretly human, and there's mistrust of science that needs to be addressed. So this is, and so Vanessa did a great job of capturing sort of what was communicated at the conference. And then Susie followed up with 5 principles of holistic science communication. She looked at the conference with an anthropological point of view and came back with these 5 take-homes. Assemble a diverse and interdisciplinary team to communicate science. Make sure you tell a story, make the messages personal, communicate with people rather than to them, and remember to be a human first. So, you know, we always talk about objectivity and data, but also bring the human element into it. My blog was how to do it better. I would have liked to have seen more cognitive studies of information processing. If it's the science of science communication, that's the science as I see it. Nothing about visualization. It was all about narrative. Storytelling and analysis would have been nice to see, how to tell stories better, and provide some examples of better science communication practices. And they had a fantastic audience there, including people from a former student, Christine O'Donnell, here in this photo from the Alan Alda School of Science Communication at Stony Brook, and Compass, NGO based in DC and Oregon, who do a lot of science communication training. So they and our group, and yet they didn't tap these kind of people. They published a new booklet called Communicating Science Effectively. This was published last year. It's a research agenda. I thought it was kind of ironic that they used the same title as a book that we published in 2006 on science communication without even acknowledging that previously published book. So they're a little bit wrapped up in their own world. And I think it can boil down to this, that's recognition within the scientific community that we have to move beyond the deficit model of science communication. And as I'll indicate later, that even the president of the National Academy, the past and present presidents really get this. And so the old model 1, knowledge deficit, that people are this empty vessel and we just throw facts at them and they'll see it our way. And it doesn't work that way. Public engagement, where you have communication and interaction with the public, versus and this is sort of the president of that society, the sort of the thought leaders. This guy Dietram Scheffele, who talks about this in this paper in the National. This is in the Proceedings of the National Academy. On how you have mediated realities which blend both the science facts and the public understanding and their perception of reality. So you have to put everything into the socio-political context. So in that booklet that they stole the title for, they talk about aligning goals with the right communication approach. And I thought these were good takeaways. We need to increase appreciation for science as a useful way of understanding and navigating the modern world. Science is quite misunderstood by non-scientists. Increase the knowledge and understanding of science related to specific issues. So we also have to inform people about climate change or GMOs or other pressing issues. Influence people's opinions, behavior, and policy preferences through this better scientific communication, effective science communication. And I think an important point is engage with diverse groups so that their perspectives about science that are related to important social issues can be considered in seeking solutions that affect everyone. So let's take it out of the ivory tower, number 1, but let's make sure we talk with a broad cross-section of society. The opening session of the conference sort of set up the problem. Scientists are often muddied, and off-putting, that they often don't tell their story very effectively and often don't see collaboration as essential. And so, this is one of the points they made on, and I just took some slide shots from the audience here, so pardon the bad quality. But in a place in the National Academy, couldn't even get wireless. It was a little wireless dead zone. Anyway, share the findings and excitement of science was I think, something important, increased appreciation, et cetera, et cetera. They talk about a key role of science communicator that sits between the research team and the audience as the mediator, as the person communicating across that. And I'm not so sure. I think scientists directly can be communicators. And when we go to dead white men, Albert Einstein, Charles Darwin, they were very effective communicators by themselves. They were best-selling authors. They wrote really, really compelling stories. And transdisciplinary and communication are linked. So you need to recognize that when you have transdisciplinary science, when you engage productively with stakeholders, you're getting across those perceptual gaps, and you're starting to cognitive integration. So when you're really understanding each other and avoiding this conflict of where you just don't see eye to eye on things. You would think that a conference on the science of science communication would have some really great PowerPoint talks, and they did. But they also had some of the worst I've ever seen, including one that was read word for word. Incentives. I'm sorry you can't see this very well, but I will go through these. I thought this was a pretty good matrix of motivation versus rewards. And what you can see here is tenure and promotion in the formal extrinsic motivation is for tenure and promotion and reviews and publishing, etc. Informally, it's to create greater visibility and avoid the label media hound, or the Carl Sagan got criticized a lot for being so approachable, and I think Neil deGrasse Tyson in current day similarly. Intrinsic motivations include, have a broader audience and a altered research strategy, and ultimately the informal intrinsic motivation, and I think this is the most important one, giving you a sense of meaning and purpose, that you're doing this for the greater good of society. Great talk by a woman that's a geneticist who combines art with science. Her father was a sculptor. Her mother was a scientist, so she's got sort of both right and left brains. And she showed some great examples of her visualization of mitosis and how beautiful those images were. And she even used this to get a grant to decorate the science building on the walls using these are scientifically meaningful representations. So nice decorative thing, and I thought this was the best of all, which was making a cake in the shape of cell division. So I think one of the things in our class when we get together in May, we'll have to figure out how we can combine chocolate, cake, and science communication. Sounds like a noble goal. There was a lot of gnashing of teeth about how there are no systems, no reward systems, and I don't think that's true. And I worked at 2 public universities in my career, University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science and University of Queensland, Australia, and they both have in UMCES we have discovery, integration, application, and teaching based on the Boyer Scholarship Reconsidered, and so those are equally weighted in tenure and promotion. And University of Queensland has teaching, research, service, and engagement. So here we are in 2 institutions actually using this as a metric. There are a couple case studies they used, the anti-vax case study, and so they talked about the problem and how we're missing academic and practitioner expertise. They need to collaborate, and that might help resolve this anti-vax problem of science communication. A woman named Fiske did some nice word clouds on on characterizing scientists, and they're smart, intelligent, curious nerds, I think is the summary that I got out of that. And so you can see some of these word clouds get across sort of the perception. These are the perceptions of scientists. They talked a lot about the norms of science, and so you base your findings on evidence, expose your work to critical review, share your results, show your data, be skeptical of your own results, and avoid bias. And then that gets into science ethics and the fraud triangle of where publish or perish drives you to create opportunities of manipulating the data or rationalizing away bad data. And so they talked about falsification, fabrication, and plagiarism, selective reporting, passing off a finding as having been a tested hypothesis, and undeserved authorship, which actually was interesting, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Gene drive case study. This is GMOs. This is genetically modified organisms, and how this is a very powerful new form of agriculture, and how there's a bit of a backlash to that. And they talked about the post-normal science being where the decision stakes and the uncertainty are high, and how that's really difficult. Marcia McNutt, who's the current president of the National Academy, really is passionate about authorship and the citation standards for authorship, and basically making sure that people that are authors are deserved authors, not just somebody you're kowtowing to. And then finally, there was some discussion about communicating uncertainty and how that's a difficult aspect of science communication, and how you and they used the example of the Weather Service. There's a percentage chance of precipitation or a hurricane path cloud, and how people can understand uncertainty. It just has to be communicated effectively and transparently. So that's a quick summary of this conference, and there'll be probably some papers that come out following. Thanks.